Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shannon Berry, Cooperative Development Coordinator with Nashville Value Point. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's Cloud Solutions State Rollout webinar. A few housekeeping items. We are recording today's webinar. It will be available on the Nashville Value Point website, along with the PowerPoint presentation being presented today. Since we are recording, please mute your phones to cut down on background noises so everyone will be able to hear the presentation. Also, please do not put us on hold. Phone systems have a tendency to have music when they are put on hold, and the music playing will come across on the webinar. We also ask that you hold your questions until we open it up for questions. We also encourage you to submit the written questions via the GoToMeeting information that's on your screen. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our team that will be presenting today. We have our Utah team, which is Chris Hughes. Chris, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, my name's Chris Hughes. I'm the Assistant Director for the State of Utah Division of Purchasing, and I led the Cloud Solution RFP for Nashville Value Point and the State of Utah.
Great, thank you. Spencer Hall, are you there?
Yes, this is Spencer Hall with the State of Utah. I'm a contract analyst, and I'll be the lead contract administrator for the Cloud Solutions portfolio contracts.
Okay, and Jennifer Saltz?
Hi everyone, I'm Jennifer Saltz. I am one of the assistant directors here in the state of Utah. I served as an evaluation team member for the Cloud Solutions RFP.
Okay, and then Dugan Petty.
Hello, I'm Dugan Petty. I'm an education and outreach coordinator for Nashville Value Point, specializing in information communication technology, multiple procurements. And I've been involved with this with Chris and the Utah team since the very beginning.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, on the screen we have our agenda of the items that we will be covering today. I've allotted an hour and a half for the webinar, so hopefully we'll be able to get everything covered along with questions within that time frame. So with that, I'll turn it over to the Utah team regarding the RFP process and evaluation.
So Shannon, this is Chris. Will you just be clicking through the slides as we need to? Because I don't think I have the ability. Okay. So thank you everyone for joining us on this webinar today with Nashville Value Point. This has been a long process, so we appreciate everybody's patience and understanding as we go through this webinar. And like Shannon said, if you have any questions, please wait until the end. This has been a solicitation that has taken some time to get in control of because of the breadth of what we were looking to do. This solicitation came together a few years ago with Nashville Value Point requesting that the state of Utah lead a new cloud solution solicitation in order to appease all of the states that were looking to move into cloud. So first off, we developed the sourcing team, and we asked as many states as we could to participate in that sourcing team, and we had representatives from Utah, Vermont, Wisconsin, New Jersey, Colorado, and Tennessee, to name a few. We did have additional help from other states, like Illinois provided some guidance when we needed it, and some other states participated as well on other activities. The sourcing team, as you can see from this slide, worked hard and long to help not only develop the specifications for the solicitation, but in scoring all of the proposals that were received. Including on the sourcing team, Shannon, if you can move to the next slide, was the ICT Advisory Council. This was a group that was set up a few years ago in order to help the state of Utah lead this cloud solicitation, with members from Vermont, Wisconsin, Oregon, Missouri, Montana, Washington, Massachusetts, Utah, Georgia, California, and others. This was a group of people that were not just procurement professionals, but CIOs and IT professionals that we sought guidance for and expertise in when developing the specifications for the cloud solicitation. As we spent over a year trying to create the RFP, we relied heavily on that ICT Advisory Council to help us understand what specifications needed to be included in the RFP and the best way to bring a cloud solution to the state. And it was through their guidance that the state of Utah was able to develop a solicitation that met the state of Utah's requirements. And on this slide, you can see that we released the solicitation on December 21st. We amended the solicitation 10 times, and that's not to say that we amended it because of errors or issues with the RFP, but it was a lot of the amendments dealt with adding new states that wanted to participate in the solicitation itself. It closed on March 20th, 2016, and we received 58 proposals. Along with those 58 proposals, we received over 550 questions from vendors regarding the solicitation and how they could participate. To go back a little, before the RFP was released, we also issued a request for information in which we posted a draft of the RFP for the vendor community to respond to. The vendor community submitted over 70 responses to the request for information, providing details on specifications, on requirements, on best ways of capturing cost, and providing us with insights into the industry that we did not know of or were unaware of, as this industry is constantly changing. In addition, in developing the RFP, the state of Utah worked with many other organizations, including organizations in Canada and other local governments, in order to understand what they were doing in their procurements of cloud and how best we could utilize our two resources in order to develop a better solicitation. One of those areas that we covered was developing a way to capture a lot of the safety and data security information from these vendors in a way that would be beneficial in both the short run and in evaluating these proposals, and in the long run of ensuring that we are able to ensure that these vendors are keeping up with the standards of the industry. All of this information went into this request for proposals, and ultimately we received 58 responses. Shannon, if you can go to the next slide. The RFP required and the responses received had to meet certain mandatory minimum requirements. I'm not going to go over each one. I'll highlight a few. If you have questions regarding what exactly was necessary, I can go over that during the question and answer period. For the state of Utah, the mandatory minimum requirements are pass-fail requirements. If a vendor submits a response, then they pass. And vendors that met all of the requirements moved on to the technical evaluation. It's important to know that while we received 58 responses, several vendors were ultimately late in submitting their responses, and they've provided feedback to me that they intend to participate if we reopen this solicitation in the future. Some of the important highlights that I'd like to call out as states go and review the master agreements, and the master agreements contain vendors' responses to the solicitation, are the executive summary is an important document to review. It's usually a 1- or 2-page document from these vendors in which they highlight their solutions that they are capable of providing under this master agreement. Another one is the scope of experience. Vendors were required to identify aspects of their service and what they've done recently in both the public areas and the private areas of in their solutions. In addition, it's important to also focus in on the contract manager. This is the person that will be managing that contract on the vendor side, and we required that they submit a resume of that person so that we could ensure that they are capable of not only running the contract effectively on their side, but they're an industry expert in order to be able to help the states know how to best use their contracts. Shannon, if you can go to the next slide. In addition, in the RFP, we scored all of the proposals on 21 evaluation criteria. That is a lot of criteria to score on, but it was the criteria that came directly from the ICT Advisory Council. Roughly 2 years ago, we met with the ICT Advisory Council in the state of Utah and asked them exactly what they were looking for in a cloud solution contract and what types of solutions would best benefit their states. And we also asked them what was needed in those contracts. What would they be looking for to ensure that the cloud providers would best meet their requirements? We had a pretty extensive list of the requirements that the ICT Advisory Council was looking for, and we ultimately decided to combine some of those criteria into one criteria rather than having double the technical criteria. As we go through this list, I'll point out some ones that I think are very important to U.S. states to pay attention to as you're reviewing the master agreements. Again, I would mention and reiterate that the vendors' responses to the proposals or to the RFP are all part of their master agreements. They range from anywhere from 100 pages to 300 pages. And that's just a matter of the information that they were giving and the breadth of the solutions that they offer. A concern from many of the ICT Advisory Council was the billing and pricing practices of these vendors. So we had these vendors identify how they would bill and price their solutions and how their billing and pricing is transparent for your states to be able to easily understand what they are being billed for. The concern is that many times public entities have entered into the cloud solution industry, and it's been more expensive than they were anticipating. So in order to best understand what we can expect from these vendors, they were scored on how they will bill and how they will price out exactly what's going on. Another one is the scope and variety of the cloud solutions. We were looking for vendors that could best meet the needs of your states. And so we were asking these vendors exactly what could their solutions provide in a unique way, since each of these providers provides these cloud solutions in their own way. So this is something that was important to the ICT Advisory Council as well. We also score their contract manager, as previously mentioned, along with their resume and any other information that they provided us regarding that person. Shannon, if you can go to the next slide. Some other technical requirements was how will they work with your purchasing entities? How will they work with the customers that will be using their services and the customer service that they will provide? The biggest concern from the ICT Advisory Council was getting to know the security information and the privacy and security that's associated with each of these contracts. This was important and as part of the ICT Advisory Council and as part of the RFP process and the RFI, and along with working with our friends up in Canada, we worked on the Cloud Security Alliance. We worked with the Cloud Security Alliance group, which Dugan Petty will be talking about later, and asked the vendors to complete a questionnaire in which they identified their security measures and providing crosswalks with the different data security measures. So we'd ask each of you to be able to review that as well. We had the vendors provide their service level agreements, which become part of the master agreement as well, so that everybody can view exactly what's going on with each vendor and how they will be working with your state and those purchasing entities. And another issue is the data disposal. Once the contract ends or once your purchasing entity wants to leave that cloud provider, what's going to happen to that data and how can we ensure that it's being disposed of properly? And along with that is how can we ensure that all of the data that's been uploaded to that cloud service provider, how is it going to be returned to the purchasing entity? So all of that can be found in the data disposal scoring criteria identified in the RFP. Shannon, if you can go to the next one. Shannon, if you can move to the next slide. And then again, we brought up the Cloud Security Alliance, and as you can tell, we asked these vendors a lot regarding their infrastructure, how they work, how they will work in terms of marketing their plans and their alignment with cloud computing. A lot of what was asked on this technical requirements was the background information of these vendors, not necessarily what their dashboards look like or how well they'll be able to, how well their website looks, but getting into the security provisions, the hosting and provisioning, and if they have any trial and testing periods that will allow the purchasing entities to use. If you can go to the next slide, Shannon. With the RFP, we scored pursuant to Utah law on a scale of 1 to 5. A 5 meaning that they addressed all the requirements in the RFP and that they exceeded them, and a 1 being that poor and they failed to address the requirement in the RFP. All of the vendors were scored by the sourcing team in a fair manner in compliance with the Utah law, and all those scores have been posted on NASPO Value Point's website. If anybody else would like those scores as well, they were posted on BidSync. All the vendors had an opportunity to review their scores, and those vendors that did not meet the technical requirement or minimum technical requirement points, they were all notified of that as well. Shannon, if you can go to the next slide. Again, in order to be eligible for an award, a proposal was required to score a minimum of 70% of the total technical points available. There was a total of 1,325 points in the technical stage, but the most important part of that, if the vendor was able to demonstrate that a technical requirement or a technical criteria was not applicable to their solution, the evaluation team and the sourcing team could evaluate that response and determine whether or not that criteria was applicable. And as the evaluation team went through those responses, they made those determinations, especially when we got to the SaaS providers, the software as a service providers. Some of the technical criteria did not apply to them. And as we found out, many of the SaaS-only providers, many of them called that out, especially when we received the hosting and provisioning category, did not apply to them. And anytime a criteria did not apply, then their total possible points went down. So those vendors that said that hosting and provisioning did not apply, their total points went from 1,325 to 1,275, but they still only needed to receive a minimum score of 70% in order to move on in the solicitation or to move on in the evaluation. Shannon, if you can move to the next slide. During the technical evaluation phase, the evaluation committee determined that the proposals that received an average score of 4 or higher per category provided sufficient information to the evaluation committee to demonstrate that their proposals exceeded the addressed requirements of the category. Overall, the evaluation committee determined that these proposals would allow participating entities an opportunity to make a best value determination based on the proposals provided by the offerors. The evaluation committee determined that the proposals that received an average score of 3 or lower per category did not provide sufficient information to demonstrate to the evaluation committee that their proposals met the requirements of the category. All of this information was provided in the justification statement that has been published on the NASPO Valley website and the State of Utah's website as well. Vendors that received a score of 3 or lower were notified of this immediately and were given an opportunity to protest that decision. I can say that the State of Utah did not receive any protests regarding the scoring of these proposals. In communicating with the vendors that were not awarded a contract or did not meet the 70% minimum 70% threshold, they were grateful from the scoring that they received, and they anticipate participating in a resolicitation if the State of Utah decides to do that. Shannon, can you move forward? Just to move on, in the opinion of the evaluation committee, 38 proposals received the technical scores that met or exceeded the minimum threshold. All 38 have been in negotiations in order to have their master agreement signed, and all 38 moved on to the scoring of their costs. Costs were reviewed based on information that was received from the ICT Advisory Council and information that was received during the request for information. The vendors felt that the best way to determine cost was through the State of Utah obtaining their price schedules and then ensuring that that the vendor was providing some sort of a mandatory minimum discount. The vendors have all reached out and provided that the best way for them to know exactly what a project would cost is when they know the exact details of the project. So for this RFP purpose, for this RFP, the cost points were awarded if vendors submitted a minimum price discount and provided their cost schedule or their pricing schedule for the solutions that they offer. We'll move on to the next slides that will show the different vendors that were awarded contracts. As you can see, we have a wide variety of different vendors that are able to provide cloud solutions. While 38 vendors were awarded contracts, comments have been made that that does sound excessive, but the evaluation committee can assure you that these vendors all met those mandatory minimum requirements, all met the minimum score threshold points, and all provided their provide a minimum discount off of their general pricing, and that all of these vendors provide unique solutions that these states will be able to use in order to achieve the best result from this contract. These vendors, while some of them are resellers of Amazon and Microsoft, they provide unique ways of being resellers that the evaluation committee believed was necessary in order to achieve a best value for the state. Shannon, can you go on? So in conclusion, based on the justifications outlined above, the 38 offerors identified above provide the best value to the state, and each has been awarded a contract subject to successful negotiations of the terms and conditions. So far, 16 contracts have been fully executed to date. I believe that number has now gone up to 19 as of this morning. In addition, 2 vendors have decided to drop off at this time, even though that they were awarded a contract. Those vendors are FireEye and IBM. If you would like detail on that, I can provide that. But the quick summary is FireEye, Carahsoft resells FireEye solutions, and IBM had an issue in their proposal that needs to be fixed. So at this time, they've decided to withdraw their proposal. But we anticipate signing master agreements with the other vendors soon, and hope to be done with all of the master agreements in December. There's just a few vendors that are awaiting final approvals from their legal teams to sign their master agreement. So check back daily on the NASPO Value website to see which vendors have been added. Okay, Shannon?
This is Dugan Petty. This is where I take over for a little bit of time and talk about cloud solutions. And this is maybe a little new to some of our rollout webinars, but we wanted to talk a little bit more about what these solutions might look like. Just kind of a brief aside, Chris mentioned the first meeting where we brought the CIOs and the Utah team together with the ICT Council to begin to understand what they wanted to see in a cloud solutions procurement. Initially, this was thought to be scoped as a public cloud SaaS offering. But after talking through it, a couple of CIOs, particularly out of Washington, Michael DeAngelo, the deputy out of Washington, and the Alabama CIO, and a couple of others said, well, why stop there? Instead of just getting public cloud and software as a service, why don't we do all three service models as defined by NIST, software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service? And also, why just in the public cloud? Why not the 4 deployment models, private cloud, hybrid cloud, which a lot of states are moving to, which kind of combines public and private, and then community cloud, which is under the NIST definition becomes in a sense our government cloud, which can be very important for CGIS applications where the only data and participants in the cloud are government organizations. And so the ICT said, yes, let's do that. And while we're at it, let's also include independent cloud-related IT consulting. They came back as we began to construct this RFP and said, well, let's see if we can move quicker. Let's drop the independent IT consulting off. So what resulted are solution offerings here that really cover a full range in the master agreement of cloud services that are tied to the NIST definition. And in addition to that, we also provide services of business partners that are related to accessing the cloud. So we certainly have the 3 definitions, the 3 service models of SaaS, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service. But we also have, because they're provided in some cases from manufacturers direct, in some cases from aggregators like Carahsoft, Chris mentioned. We've got a full range of business partners that would represent Google or Microsoft or Oracle or Splunk or any number of providers, and then resellers, including Salesforce.com. So even though you may not see some of those major providers there, Amazon Web Service for one, you will be able to access them through either, as Chris said, a reseller or a business partner. And in fact, the business partners can provide some services along the way to help you get there. So that's a pretty good solution and a wide range of services. I'm just going to touch on the examples here in the next slide or two, because I think you'll get a good feel for what's out there. The reason we've included these is because if we just say, well, we have software as a service in a public cloud, that doesn't really tell you exactly what that is. So we know so far that we've got a pretty wide range of services out there in SaaS. Everything from cloud-based phone system, unified communication, ERP systems, where it could be a full-range ERP delivered through the cloud, or it could be, say, a human resources module, desktop as a service, email. There are programs there that would address fraud, waste, and abuse. There are data analytics as a service, mobile case management, and more. And so when we put the RFP out, we identified these NIST definitions of the service model, SaaS, platform, and infrastructure as a service, and we gave some examples, but we invited providers to give us a full range of these because we didn't want to limit them. And so right now, we are going to have a pretty full range of software as a service, and then, as Chris said, within 2 years, Utah can go out and refresh this, which will even add potentially more SaaS offerings and other cloud offerings. Because this is really a dynamic environment that's important, because there's no doubt will be SaaS offerings that you may want to have access to that we're not even talking about or don't exist today that will under the life of this contract. One of the things we did a little different with this is we asked each of the providers to give us a service summary document that's included on the website. So when you look at these 19 now providers, look at the summary document. You can find that on NASPOvaluepoint.org. Click on the portfolio providers, click on Cloud Solutions, and then click on any one of the providers. There's a screen print of that you saw a few slides back, and up will come their contract, their RFP, a variety of documents, including the summary document, which will give you a good listing of the services that they are specializing in and making available. So you'll get more detail, and that'll help you decide which of these providers you may be interested in executing an intent to participate for, a participating addendum for. Next slide, please. So PASS is really application development on a provider's platform. As I said earlier, I think Carahsoft, there are business partners that provide Salesforce.com and other platform as a service providers. So you can access that and build the application in the cloud on a platform as a service. Next slide. And then actually a wide variety. I think maybe the bulk of the responses that we got back really focused on infrastructure as a service. And this, of course, is hosting in the cloud, off-prem data center that's accessed through your web browser. And these are for your computing and your storage requirements. And with these, typically there are available managed services and system integration that can help you move in this direction. Next slide. And I'll turn it back over.
Thank you, Dugan. And so, like Dugan said, I'm going to go over the master agreement overview and discuss kind of what the ICT Advisory Council envisioned in this by using these contracts, what the state of Utah allows under its laws in using these contracts, and what we requested from the vendors in order for you as states to make a best value determination in which of the master agreements you can use. So as a reminder, the state of Utah does not have a requirement that all master agreements need to go live at the same time. We allow for a rolling out start date for each of these master agreements, which means that we have 16 vendors already under contract, and that as new master agreements get signed and are uploaded, then those master agreements are out there for your use. But we also have a requirement that it's not going to be a 10-year contract from the start of their contract, but all contracts will expire at the same time. In addition, each of the master agreements requires that the vendors submit an annual requalification and are subject to performance review. The annual requalification is not a detailed process, but it's just requesting from the vendors that they still meet the requirements and the technical components that were outlined in their proposals. The vendors will submit a document just certifying that they still meet those requirements and that they're still capable of providing the services and solutions that they were awarded. And this will ensure that the vendors are staying up to date on their requirements, and it will ensure that they're doing what they need to. In addition, it allows the state of Utah to do a performance review of these contracts. And in addition, we would like feedback from each of you as you use these master agreements. Help us to understand what performance measures we should be looking for and how best to review these contracts on an annual basis. This feedback will help the state of Utah and the vendors know how to best serve you when using these contracts. and to help the state of Utah when we decide to go out for that refresh and re-solicit this contract to be able to add new vendors, and to know maybe there's a new criteria that you would like us to add in order to best determine or to have the best vendors under master agreement. It is a possibility that we can submit this out for every 2 years, but it's not a requirement. So your feedback will help us understand if there are new and emerging vendors in these categories. So as you provide us the state of Utah feedback, we will best know how to manage these master agreements. Shannon, next slide. So the objective of the NASPO Valley Point Utah Cloud Solutions Master Agreements is to provide states and their authorized end users with a contract vehicle that provide access to qualified contractors that may meet the needs of your state and when considering software as a service, infrastructure as a service, and platform as a service. The ICT Advisory Council wanted this to be the contract and the RFP to be a way for states to be able to make a best value determination from those qualified vendors, knowing that each of these vendors provides unique solutions in order to reach your unique problems in each of your states. A vendor that's qualified to do a service or a solution in one state may not meet the same requirements in another state. We know each of your states has its own statutes and regulations that you need to follow, and each of these vendors has unique qualifications that they have in order to meet those requirements. We've asked vendors to provide us with an understanding of their cloud security standards, and we evaluated those standards. But it is ultimately the responsibility of the end user to thoroughly review the services, the SLAs, the terms and conditions, and risks involved before executing a participating addendum and a statement of work. The state of Utah understood in negotiating these master agreements that not all of these vendors fit the same cookie cutter mold, that each of these vendors is unique in their own way, and as such these master agreements contain unique differences that states should review in order to make a best value determination. Not all of the software as a service vendors are equal. They are qualified, but they treat data differently, and when you get into the infrastructure and platform providers, their ability to hold certain information or certain data may be limited. That they identified that information on what is attachment B, the scope of services. So as you review the master agreements, make sure that you ensure that they're capable of securing the data that your state would need. Shannon, next slide. The data security was the major component of the RFP evaluation process and the master agreement. A way in capturing most of that was through the Cloud Security Alliance and the recommendations incorporated into the RFP requirements and resulting master agreements. We required that each of the vendors meet the NIST characteristics, i.e. to be a true cloud service provider. We followed the definitions that were outlined in the NIST standards and asked the vendors to identify how each of them met those standards. Some of the questionnaires and provided in the CSA documents help identify these characteristics. In addition, the vendors must meet security requirements which leverage the following cloud-focused security frameworks, including the CSA STAR certification, ISO, and NIST standards. Vendors identified these in their solicitations and in their summaries. So as states, we highly recommend that you review the proposals in making a determination on which participating addendums to use, because not every vendor is able to meet all of these requirements. Shannon, next slide. In addition, the master agreements include the SLAs that outline the security controls that contractors employ specific to the data that they are prepared to handle. These SLAs were the generic SLAs from these vendors, and the vendors acknowledged to me during the negotiations of the master agreements that they would like the opportunity to modify those SLAs as they understand the exact projects that they will be working on for each of the states. That's something to take into consideration as you enter into these participating addendums to ensure that you are leveraging those SLAs in what's best for your state. In addition, we encourage participating state CIOs and CPOs to evaluate each master agreement receiving a service category and not to just rely on the evaluation team scores, but to review those vendors that are in the cloud solution that you are looking for and make your own objective and subjective determination based on your state laws and what's required under any regulation that will be impacted by you using a cloud service provider. Utah has worked diligently to negotiate the vendor exceptions and additional terms and conditions in favor of participating states in each master agreement in order to lessen the negotiation burden during the participating addendum execution. However, again, it's your state's responsibility to review and negotiate any unique terms specific to their state law if the master agreement terms do not meet your needs. In negotiating these master agreements, these vendors are aware that there may be state laws that need to be included in the participating addendum, so please be diligent in ensuring that those state laws are covered in your participating addendums and that you're complying with all of your state laws and not relying on the master agreements to ensure compliance with maybe a unique state law from your state. Okay, Shannon? The master agreement, there is a NASPO value administrative fee, but states are also allowed to require an additional fee to be paid directly to the state only on the purchases made by the purchasing entities within that state. For all such requests, the fee level, payment method, and schedule for such reports and payments should be incorporated into the participating addendum so that the vendors are aware of that as well. Next slide, Shannon. If you have any questions beyond this webinar, please do not hesitate to call me at 801-538-3254, or you can email me at that address. You can also contact Spencer Hall regarding the master agreements, as he is the supervisor, the contract manager over this portfolio of contracts. We look forward to working with each one of you and anticipate many questions and we hope that we can resolve those questions for you as well. Okay, next slide. And okay, I think I'm turning it over to NASPO Value Point.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So the participating addendum process. All states have executed a cooperative memorandum of agreement allowing them to participate in contracts that NASPO Value Point has put in place. When participating, please ensure your organizational policies and guidelines are followed, and we strongly encourage that the state CPO and CIO collaborate before executing a PA for the cloud solutions contracts. Make sure to review vendors' responses, including CSA documents, to ensure requirements are met and they follow your state's guidelines. Make sure your security and privacy requirements are complied with when moving to a cloud solution. And you may want to include your approval process in the PA so that the vendors are aware of the process and they are not working outside of your state's approval process and policies. So there are three basic options to participate. Option one, which is NASPO Value Point's preferred option. The state CPO will execute a PA allowing all agencies and eligible entities within that state to participate in the contract. Option two, For whatever reason, if the state CPO chooses not to allow their state agencies to participate, they have the option of signing a PA on behalf of the other eligible entities within their state to allow them to participate on the contracts. And then option 3, again, the state CPO chooses not to participate under options 1 or 2. However, the state CPO may allow eligible entities to sign their own PA with an individual contractor. We do require that the state CPO approve these individual PAs prior to them negotiating and executing PAs on their own. Okay, so step-by-step option to participate in 1 is the state CPO along with the CIO will choose whichever vendors they want to enter into a participating addendum, and they will negotiate their PA directly with the contractor. Contractors may contact states based on the intent to participate that were signed during the solicitation process. States may negotiate additional items into their PAs, such as their state administrative fees, separate reporting requirements, or their unique terms and conditions required within their state. Note that neither Value Point nor the lead state get involved in your state's negotiations. We are certainly here to answer any questions you may have, but we do not review and approve the individual participating addendums. It's only between your state and the contractor. Once the PA is executed and signed by both parties, we ask that a PDF copy of the PA is emailed to Value Point at the email pa@nashvillevaluepoint.org. We will log it and then post it on the Nashville Value Point website. Okay, we've added, here's a couple terms that are included in each vendor's model participating addendum, stating that the participation is only within the authority of the state's chief procurement official, and then access to the cloud solution services also require the state CIO approval regarding technology within their state. Okay, so these 2 terms are included in each of the vendors' models participating addendums. Okay, steps to participate for option 2 are basically the same steps as option 1, except the CIO does not need to be involved in the approval of the PA, and the PA will only apply to non-state entities, so it will be applied to all other eligible entities within the state. And then option 3 is non-state entity and no state PA. If the state CPO chooses not to sign a PA in options 1 or 2, then the CPO may approve eligible entities to enter into their own individual participating addendum. Those entities should send an email to Value Point. We have the email listed on the slide there. It's info@nashvillevaluepoint.org, and that will go to our education and outreach team, which will assist the individual entities into receiving the state chief procurement official's approval in order for them to enter into their own participating addendum. Once the CPO provides their approval, and it can be via just a simple email, there's no required form, then the eligible entity is free to negotiate directly with the contractor that they choose. Again, negotiations are directly between the entity and the contractor. And then the executed PA needs to be sent to Value Point for posting and to maintain in our repository and files. Okay. Some additional information, state-specific administrative fees for sales within their state that they can add into the PA, again. Specific terms and conditions to their state. Also within the cloud requirements, any state-specific for their security requirements, they want to make sure to include in those. In their PA, they can identify eligible entities such as states, local governments only. Additional reporting requirements. NASPO Value Point requires all of our contractors to submit detailed reporting. We are trying to capture everything that we can on behalf of all the states participating, but if there's additional information that we are not capturing, you can request a contractor to submit that directly to your state. You can select a contract with any limits in services offered. You can identify how projects will be executed if the CIO office or the procurement division, under which authority, and then include any service level agreements and any review and amendment procedures that may need to happen within your state for that PA. We have a model participating addendum on the website for each contractor. We ask that everyone start with that model PA to ensure you're capturing the appropriate information. All executed PAs are maintained in our files and on our website. All participating states will be identified on the map on the website, which will be colored in blue. Please only submit fully executed, signed by both parties PAs in a PDF format. And these PAs can be sent either by the state or entity or contractor. Additional reminders, may want to incorporate your organizational policies and guidelines, including your state's IT process and their involvement. Review all documents for vendors to ensure your state's requirements will be met. It's important to make sure your state information security and privacy requirements are met when using a cloud solution. And you may want to suggest or may want to include the approval process in your PA so that, again, the vendors are aware of the process and they're not working outside of your state's approval policies. Okay, now we'll turn it over to Dugan to go over the participating entity due diligence.
Thanks, Shannon. So Utah has done a tremendous amount of work to bring this to the point where we're at right now. Shannon has kind of outlined some of the steps that you'll want to take to build the participating addendum, which really becomes your contract for the entities under your authority that you want to have services received from these cloud providers. But one of the things that we recommend that you do before you execute that contract is to perform your own due diligence on the cloud provider, and that really starts here with a look at data security. We want to make sure that the state or the using entity looks at the data that they're going to store in the cloud and understand the security requirements around that data and satisfies for themselves that the cloud provider actually can meet the data security that they need for that. And we also want to make sure that that when the state looks at it, that they make sure that given the criticality of the workload that they're going to place into the cloud, that the appropriate data controls exist to protect the interests of the state and the jurisdiction. Sounds simple enough, but when we're talking about the cloud, different things that are going to be in the cloud, different service models, there are a lot of combinations and permutations here. And we kind of grappled for a while with how we were going to address security. The difficulty is that we have 47 different states with different PII laws, and we don't have uniform security classifications between all the states. And frankly, depending on what the data is that you're going to have in the cloud, if it's just public information, it may not require a very rigorous protection of that data because it's public anyway. On the other hand, if it's CGIS information, it's going to have very stringent security requirements. So the slides that we're going to go over here are our effort to create, along with this RFP and really integrate it into the RFP, is a way of the states determining that their security and data control needs are met and that they can be sure that when they're putting an application in the cloud, that they've got the kinds of controls set out by the application provider that they need to meet their requirements. That means you have to understand what the requirements are. So the slides that follow are kind of summary of a webinar that we did a few months ago, back in July, that went over the data controls and security in the cloud. We had a couple of CISOs from one from British Columbia and then Elaine Starkey from Delaware, who gave us great ideas and great tips, and then we had a representative from the Cloud Security Alliance talking about it. And so we've got, I think, in that webinar some instructive information, so you're welcome to find out on our website. I'm going to hit some of the high points here. The first one is making sure that the security, that we understand that the right security data classification, and we have to understand what our breach laws are. Next, with the data controls and the security controls, we really need to understand, and Chris alluded to this, but for infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, some parts of the security continuum, that chain of security, are only able to be addressed by the customer. So if we don't have encrypted data, when we turn it over to the cloud provider, our part of this, we may have some exposure. So we need to really understand, particularly in infrastructure and platform as a service, whose responsibility, where our responsibilities end, where the contract providers begin, and make sure that that's covered. Recommendation that came out of that, and we'll talk more about it, is leveraging industry standards and certification so that we have demonstrated compliance, and we can rely on that compliance when we execute a contract with somebody because we know that they have that. And then the need to identify specific security controls and get additional certifications to make sure that we have both the privacy requirements met when it involves PII requirements. Next slide, please. Next slide, Shannon. Okay, so we have really built in and integral to this RFP 3 tools that are provided by the Cloud Security Alliance. And this is an organization that works with providers as well as consumers of cloud to define what the requirements are and bring that into some kind of a digestible uniform framework. And really the centerpiece of it is the Cloud Controls Matrix, the CCM. And so it really takes all these different control areas, these different domains, and identifies the controls and who has responsibility for them. It's really an anchor to how we deal with security and compliance and how we measure it, because it gives us a framework of these 16 controls. And it maps the different security regulations and standards, whether it's NIST or ISO 27001 or COBIT or PCI or HIPAA or FISMA or FedRAMP. It maps them all across this. So you can look at this Cloud Controls Matrix and understand what maps to what. In that way, whether you have a security classification that's based on FISMA or a security classification based on ISO 27001, you can cross-map those and find out where those controls are met. The next thing that's really a very important tool here is the Consensus Assessment Initiative Questionnaire, or CAIQ. It's an assessment tool that the Cloud Security Alliance puts out and maintains that cloud providers complete. And they either complete it by a self-assessment or by a third party or a third-party certification, either an attestation or a third-party certification. When we constructed the RFP, in it we built a requirement that at a minimum they had to have one of these on file, and they had to complete it. If it was done by an attestation by a third party, we gave them more points. If it was done by a third-party certification, and many of them are, even more points yet. But at a minimum, they have to have completed one of these, and they have to have it on file. And the contract requires that they maintain, that they represent and warrant that they maintain this throughout the life of the contract. And this is what a state or a participating entity can base their decision on, because they can actually take a look based on this questionnaire to see what security standards the application meets, and they can do their due diligence to determine whether they've met that. The way they do that is that they look at the Cloud Security Alliance STAR, which is a Security Trust and Assurance Registry, that is a framework that provides this certification program. And you can go on this and see if an application that you're considering using meets FedRAMP or FISMA or 27001. And as the standards change and mature, they're added to this. So we think this is a good way of doing the due diligence that you need to do to make sure that your cloud data that will be in the cloud is appropriately protected, and that the controls that you need in place are in fact there. Next slide, please. Next slide. So the next slide will show you the Cloud Security Alliance controls matrix, the 16 different domains, whether it's human resource security or identity access management. These are the control points that are identified in there, and you can see what the standards or certifications are that govern in this area. So it's a really good way to match up your need to an application out there and make sure that the application is appropriate for what you need to use it for in the cloud. So that, I think, next slide, please. I think that completes the due diligence, and I'll turn it over to Jennifer Saltz to share some tips to consider when moving into the cloud.
Thanks, Dugan. So just so everybody is aware, I was able to attend the Gartner Sourcing and Strategic Vendor Relations Summit, thanks to a scholarship provided by NASPO Value Point. And during that summit, I was able to collect some information that I felt like might be helpful to those who were putting together their scopes of work after they get their PA executed. Next slide, Shannon. So some of the information that they had shared was basically just to complete your scope of work. Don't leave anything, in a gray area. Understand the application, understand what's in scope and out of scope, and make sure that your staff understands that, and make sure that the vendor's staff understands that. Make sure to clarify the ownership of tasks and deliverables. This is very specific for infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. Only because there is a hybrid model here, so or hybrid responsibility. So the state is responsible for certain pieces of security, and also that the vendor is responsible for that as well. Don't rely on generic definitions. Make sure that you document any business value expectations. Make sure that it's aligned with the skills and abilities of your vendor, and that there's a clear path to meeting your state's goals and objectives. Also, take a minute and define the cost to manage the risk and the quality. Is there going to be a cost to the state, or could that be moved over and have the vendor take on that risk? So there's a lot to think about as you put your scopes of work together. But one thing that we just want to stress is, this is a state's responsibility. Make sure that you go through, again, the skills, the abilities, and the solutions provided by the vendor, and really do your due diligence before you make a selection for who's going to be in charge of your solution and your data. Next slide, Shannon. So service level agreements, they cannot be an afterthought. So again, make sure that service level agreements that the vendors have included in their solicitations and will be applicable to your specific project align with the objectives of the state. Make sure they're specific, that they're measurable, they're actionable, they're relevant, and there is a time frame associated with that. Again, just make sure that service level agreements, the terms and conditions included in those SLAs are acceptable to your state. And you know, in the event that there's something that you can't live with, it's your responsibility to negotiate those pieces of the service level agreements that don't necessarily align. And again, just make sure that you closely evaluate the terms and conditions for exclusions and exceptions, and consider the review process for adjustments to those service level agreements over time. Okay, next slide, Shannon. And making sure that an exit strategy is in place is critical. You need to structure your participating addendum to enable an exit strategy. Review the master agreements and your PA termination disentanglement clauses, and develop an exit plan in advance. You don't want to get caught, you know, in the event that, heaven forbid, a vendor should be going under, and what are you going to do? Or let's say you're going to migrate from one vendor to another. You know, how are you going to exit with that vendor and migrate over? So again, just consider terms and conditions up front for an exit strategy, and then review the costs and schedules, and again, the responsibility of who does what during the exit. It's just a best practice to, you know, have that reviewed and a process in place before you execute your scope of work with a vendor. Next slide, Shannon. So lastly, you know, again, we can't stress enough the importance of a clearly defined scope of work and the objectives for your cloud project. Again, just making sure that they align with all of the goals and objectives for your key stakeholders. Again, making sure that transition planning is part of your scope of work. Make sure that you have comprehensive and achievabilities listed for goals and objectives in your transition plans. Jointly manage your transition plans and escalate issues before they become major risks in your project. And again, measure and proactively manage transition processes and basically just the entire project to ensure that the vendor is complying as you move through all of the milestones of the project. Next slide, Shannon. I'll turn it back over to Dugan.
Thanks,
Okay,
Shannon.
So we have a few minutes for questions. There's been a couple questions submitted via the GoToMeeting. Where do I find the Cloud Security Alliance tool? I think that's for Dugan.
So the Cloud Security Alliance tools are on their website. If you Google Cloud Security Alliance, that will take you to their site, and you want to look at the CSA star location, which is Security Trust and Assurance Registry. They also provide a variety of different informational, kind of tutorial information to help you familiarize yourself with it. And you might take a look at our NASPO Value Point site. On the media page, there is a webinar listing that we held in July, and there are kind of overview slides of the Cloud Security Alliance. So if you Google Cloud Security Alliance, that will take you to their site.
Okay. Another question, will we be provided a copy of the slide presentations? And yes, the recording of this webinar and the slides will be posted on the NASPO Value Point website. And that's all the questions I have submitted. Are there any additional questions that people have? No? Okay. Okay, there's another question. It says, in regards to pricing, do the states have the ability to negotiate the uplift charges? I think that's for Chris.
So yes, states will have the ability to negotiate pricing beyond what's been identified in the contract. What the vendors provided was a minimum price discount. And in negotiations with vendors, this is a very competitive field with vendors wanting to get into as many states as they can. But with that, they couldn't provide their absolute lowest pricing because of the competitiveness and all the pricing being made public. But like many other cooperative contracts, as you start to work with vendors, they will be providing additional discounts and negotiating pricing based on the projects that are being identified at that time. As the vendors know more about the projects, the specifics of a project, the pricing should go down, is my understanding from these vendors. This was a way of the pricing that was captured will help you guys make a best value determination in helping to develop budgets, in knowing what the maximum price could be, but it also allows the vendors to be flexible in what they're able to actually charge. No, but you have the assurity that they cannot go above where they cannot go above their price lists.
And Chris, in some cases there are multiple business partners that represent manufacturers. There's nothing that prevents a jurisdiction, a state, to actually have a sampling and some kind of secondary competition off of this between those business partners, is there?
No, that would actually be a best practice, is given that you do have some resellers that resell the same products, is to do an informal bid process in which they will compete against each other and be providing you with the best price. And that is, in fact, I believe what the state of Utah intends to do in using these contracts, is doing a competitive price based on the project on the back end of these. And the vendors are aware of that.
Okay, thank you. There's another question that says, any comments on the AWS partner brokers? Does anyone understand what that is? AWS partner brokers?
I don't have a comment. I'm not sure if that's a reference to Amazon Web Services or not. Chris, does that make any sense to you?
Just the Amazon Web Services. I'm not aware of kind of that question as well. I noticed that there was talk about a 15% uplift charge from the state of Arizona. I'm going through some contracts and I'm not seeing reference to that. And since it is not referenced, I would recommend that if a vendor is charging you something outside of the scope of the contract, please notify the state of Utah immediately so that we can talk to that vendor regarding what charges are appropriate and what charges are not appropriate.
Okay, next question. Go ahead.
That's good advice about the life of the contract.
Okay. Were the cloud security tools evaluated, or did they get points just for having it on file?
So they got points for having it on file. Is that these are very complex documents that cover, and tell me if I'm wrong, Dugan, but one of the questionnaires covers over, I want to say over 150 points that CIOs want to know about in determining which in determining the security of a cloud provider. So they were very complex, deal with a lot of technical requirements and a lot of crosswalks between NIST and ISO in order to ensure that the end users know exactly what the vendor is capable of providing. So the more information that they were able to provide through these questionnaires, if they provided only one or provided both of them, or like Dugan said, got certified by a third party, the more points they got, because then they're becoming a little more transparent and making decisions on the back end to be made using a best value determination.
Okay. And then same question for Microsoft, including Azure. I think that's any comments regarding Microsoft, including Azure.
So if it's a question related to the Cloud Security Alliance, Microsoft Azure is covered and is on the R-star list.
Okay, it says Unisys seemed broadest offering. Is that true?
Yeah, Unisys is a vendor that is very broad in what they can provide. They are a big reseller that is capable of reselling a wide variety of different cloud providers. Sometimes that's a good thing. I can liken it into a Walmart or a Costco where you can go in and find what you're looking for. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they may be the best solution for what you're looking for. There are some other resellers that maybe just focus on one type of service. And so that's kind of where the best value determination comes in for these states, is to make a determination of which of these providers best meets their needs and how to use these contracts, and not just to rely on a fact that one vendor provides more solutions, but review these CSA documents, review the responses, review the pricing to ensure that you are getting the best value for your state.
Next question, are there cloud broker services available?
And I can speak. Dugan, do you want to speak to this, or do you want me to?
Well, I believe there are cloud brokering services related to that, because some of the business partners that can provide, whether it's AWS or Microsoft, will broker.
Mm-hmm. Some of these resellers that have that capability of listening to what your needs are and then being able to identify which one of their solution providers is best able to meet your needs.
Okay. Next question, are price fees in the master agreements? If yes, are they all apples to apples comparable?
So the price schedules and everything that we received on pricing, and one of the reasons why we took into account asking the vendors to provide a minimum price discount and provide their price schedules, is because at times these cannot be apple-to-apple comparisons. Even when a project is specifically identified, these vendors can have unique and differing opinions on the best solution for those projects. So it is not just, I don't want to say that it's difficult to be able to compare the pricings, but it's not as easy as getting two price schedules and reviewing it and comparing them line item by line item. Is a vendor that may look like they cost more than another vendor may offer additional services and solutions with that service or that solution. So when reviewing the pricing, take that into account, and you may have to have some communications with the vendors in order to fully understand their pricing and how it can be and how it can help you in making the best value determination.
Okay. Next question, specifically in regards to AWS and Azure, who will be providing these cloud services within their award?
That is a very good question. We do have multiple resellers for both AWS and Azure. In talking with AWS, AWS is developing a cloud page that identifies all of their vendors, all of their resellers under this NASPO Value Point contract. If you look at the summary documents of the vendors, they identify which solution that they provide, whether it's AWS or Azure or both. So without going into exact detail about who provides what, I would just invite all states that are interested in using these master agreements to review the summary documents. I believe that once we are done with all the master agreements, we can create kind of a master list of those vendors that provide AWS and which providers provide Azure and which providers provide both in order to best help you. But at this time, we don't have an exact list of that being called out except in those summary documents. If you'd like to email me after, I can forward you the information that was provided to me by AWS so that you can know exactly which vendors provide AWS products, even though they may not call it out directly.
Okay.
I see summary documents are not on every contract. Will that be updated? Yes. We did ask vendors to provide a summary document. If there's not one on there now, it will be posted. We wanted to get these contracts posted, but give vendors the opportunity to provide a concise and clear summary document for all of you to read. If you're wanting additional information specific to a vendor, just email me and I'll get that over to you as well. In addition, if you look in the proposal submitted, a lot of the summary documents just are coming straight from the proposals because it's coming from that executive summary page.
Okay, and then there's two questions on if there's a target date to complete the all 38 contracts.
So there is a target date to do that in mid-December. All vendors all vendors that have not signed a master agreement are pretty far along in their negotiations. We're just finalizing some of the final points regarding their solution. Like I said, these solutions are not cookie cutter across the board, and each of these solutions that we're finalizing now may have required a unique term or a unique exception that we had not dealt with the other contracts. So we're just reviewing those and making sure that they are the best terms and conditions that we can get for each state, for the states.
Okay, and one final question. Did any vendors stand out as excellent in their iterations with Utah and NASPO Value Point, good communication, clear agreements, etc.?
So I'm not going to make any sort of a recommendation based on that, but I can say that each of these vendors was very professional in what they did, and each of these vendors met the requirements of the RFP. The evaluation committee was very appreciative of the information that was provided by each of these vendors in evaluating them, and in the way that these 38 vendors that were awarded, they were able to clearly understand the solution that was being offered and the answer to the response. So, sorry, Dugan, what?
There's an interesting dynamic with these vendors. There are a number of these cloud solution providers that have not held many contracts with state and local governments before, but have got a significant amount of cloud experience with federal government agencies. So we saw some new vendors coming in who we haven't seen a lot of in state government before, but are moving into the state and local government space, and most of them have, if not all of them, have a significant resume of federal agency contracts and cloud work. The federal government's had a cloud-first policy for a while, so I think we were seeing high-quality proposals coming back from actually certainly all 38.
Okay, thank you. So on the screen we have Dugan Petty's contact information along with my contact information, Shannon Berry, regarding any questions on Nashville Value Point. And also, again, the team from Utah, Chris Hughes and Spencer Hall, are available for questions regarding specific questions to the contract. Thank you all for attending today's webinar. Reminder that the webinar recording will be posted to the Nashville Value Point website along with the slide deck for your information. And I hope everyone has a great day. And thank you all.